Hello, and welcome to the Natural State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin. It is my belief that the natural state of any living organism is health, and that our artificial habitat has forced us into having artificial health problems. This show is my attempt to dive deep and learn about using nutrition, sleep, movement, relationships, and more to help you reclaim your natural state of health in a modern world and show you how to thrive in an environment that's stacked against you. If you enjoyed today's show, you can find out more details and information at dranthonygustin.com. This week on the show, I have Emily Schromm, a good friend of mine, who chats with me in great detail around something we've both worked on in the last year plus, which I don't think gets a lot of coverage in the health circuit, which is, defining emotional awareness and expressing emotion and how that relates to health. And I think that health, as I define it in the podcast, is an absence of disease or suffering. And again, that's why we named the podcast The Natural State. I just think the natural state of any organism is health, which is, again, the removal of disease or suffering. And I think that a lot of people suffer with their emotions and can't actually feel them. And her and I both have experienced this in the past and are actively working through it. So we share our stories around how we're sort of pushing through and using some tools and tricks to sort of upgrade our health beyond just looking at, what are we putting in our body, how are we moving our bodies. And so a lot of personal anecdotes here. I think this is stuff, again, that's sort of underserved in this area, and a lot of people aren't talking about it. So, and if we sound much like amateurs trying to work through this stuff on our own, it's because we are. And so hopefully you can take some of our lessons and incorporate it in your own health journey. And so, some of this stuff might sound a little woo-woo, a little out there. And trust me, I am a very skeptical person, and I thought so myself. So hopefully you can have an open mind while going into this conversation. And I truly hope that you learn something from this and can apply it to your own life. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to tell you about how you can directly support the show. It is not free to produce this podcast, and I don't want to use the typical model of selling your attention to sponsors to fund the show. I want you to be able to take all of my health recommendations seriously without wondering if I'm being paid to promote something to you. If you want to support the team that is behind this podcast, head on over to either one of the brands that I've founded at perfectketo.com or equipfoods.com. I've developed the products for each of these companies with my insanely high standards because I couldn't find them anywhere else. Perfect Keto offers everything you need to support a whole foods-based ketogenic diet, from exogenous ketones to help you transition into keto and boost your energy, to super clean collagen bars that have been tested not to spike your blood sugar. It's literally the only bar that I know of that won't, and that's why I made it. Over at Equip Foods, we take real food ingredients seriously. You'll find only whole food ingredients like beef protein powder, sweet potato powder, grass-fed liver capsules, and more. If it's your first time trying the products at either one of these brands, use code NATURALSTATE for 20% off your first order. And if you feel amazing focusing on 100% real foods, awesome. These products are intended to support a proper foundation of health and nutrition, and they are not magic pills. All right, enough of that. Let's get into the show. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me today.
I'm so glad to be here. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And yourself?
I'm doing so well. I'm sorry we didn't get to see each other in person.
Well, now that we're both in quarantine because of the coronavirus, I think that we made the best call.
Don't you feel lucky that we have, we didn't have to pivot so much. It was like, we work from our laptop. We continue to do that. I feel really grateful for that, especially today.
I am also grateful for that. It's been a while since we've had you on the podcast, and you're always somebody who surprises people with all the new projects you have going on. So I thought it would be good to dive into some of your new learnings and see where your sort of health journey has brought you.
Oh man, it's always it's a journey, Anthony. It's a journey.
One of the biggest things. So I want to chat about your new book, or I don't know how you externally communicate. If it's like a tome, or what's sort of the language you use here to your little journal of expression?
Well, the book has been. This is an example of kind of what we were talking about before you hit record, of how you need as a business owner to always make things approachable and, digestible for the consumer and put it into a pretty box and sell it. And one of the things that I've realized is I'm really bad at that. I make things really hard for myself because I'm looking at my book being like, this is a book and I have no idea still how to explain it, except it's just the process of self-discovery in a way that I wanted to make really relatable and just kind of humanize that we all, no matter where we're at in our journey, we all experience the same feelings of doubt and pressure and feeling as if we are crazy in our own head, but everyone else is equally as crazy. So I don't really know what to call the process, but it was so therapeutic for me to write and get out into the world, because it allowed me to kind of express myself. When we talk about ourselves in the podcast, you always share your story of who you are and what you created and the amazing stuff you do. And at some point, it just gets a little old sharing that same narrative. Right. And I felt like it was just, especially being on reality TV and Women's Health magazine and having all these labels, from fitness model to influencer to entrepreneur, whatever it was like this book represented a way for me to bring my narrative to life in my own unique way. So I had full control over it. And that was just so therapeutic and wonderful for me. So it's a strange book, but it's also just such a relatable book. And I've had so much fun just launching it to the world in the way that I wanted to. So that is the newest fun project, I feel. Well, one of the newest fun projects that I sent you. So
there's a lot to chat about as far as that book goes, but maybe just for people who have never seen it or have no idea what it's all about, just give a brief overview.
Yeah. So the process is, I divided it into 4 chapters. Do, feel, know, make. And I am a creator. And so I consider myself a maker, just like you and many people listening. We want to make something, whether it's, creatively and doesn't have a financial obligation to it. So it's not necessarily our career, or it is our career and how we make money. I always am a maker, but the stress of making things or companies or products can be a whole lot less if we focus on the do and the feel and the know. So I kind of focused on this journey of myself, my own personal experience that I saw over and over and over again. We're doers. We use doing as a way to get through doubt. We're scared of something, we do it, we're not as scared of it, right? But then we equally get sucked into the doing being addictive, because doing feels really good. It gives us the results, and we're in this cycle that we just can't get out of. And so I was very much in that cycle for the majority of my life. And starting in 2018, after lots of different bouts of adrenal dysfunction and, trying to calm my brain and, saying that I was the person that could never meditate, really understanding the power of feel and what that meant, sitting in my own shit, looking inward, not running away from things. And then the power of no. And I think no is just a big word for saying, like, what is our heart saying? What do we want to do? What feels right? And combining those in a way that allow you to be an entrepreneur that is unstoppable, but also isn't burdened by the stress that we so often carry as creators.
Yeah. What I saw a lot in this book, and maybe I'm totally overreading here, this is not real at all, but just a lot of not just struggling with emotions and figuring out who you are and what you want, but more so expressing it and figuring it out along the way. And sort of it being almost cathartic for you to go through the process of working through this on your own and then just sharing it with people. And I think that this is something that we just, those in health, sort of promoting health stuff online, especially in whatever way that may look, whether it's products or online courses or whatever, books, podcasts, whatever. I just don't think that a lot of people will chat about this sort of philosophical stress that we're all under a lot of times. And, nutrition's a very easy one to grasp. Movement, very easy. Sleep, okay, yeah, like everyone gets that. But when I sort of talk about this 4th bucket of stress, people they can relate maybe to being in traffic or not having money to pay bills or having somebody yell at you, and that sort of adrenaline peak fight or flight response. And what I think that a lot of people miss out on is just that there's a lot of getting caught up in the day-to-day and not being able to express yourself emotionally or creatively that I think is just innate to humans that we're losing as a society, which is leading to a lot of sort of this existential angst. So, this sounds like it's getting kind of heavy already, but this is one of those things where I don't see a lot of people chatting about this. And I've sort of have gone through this sort of questioning of identity and figuring out, again, same as you, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Do I actually enjoy them? Is society figuring out what I want to do for me, and I'm just acting like a robot and doing these things? Is something that's charging me up or something that's depleting me? And I think that, we are very grateful to be in a position to have these questions, but this conversation, broadly speaking, is not happening. And I think that it's it was sort of like the last and is the last sort of big bucket for me to address with my health and sort of where I want to be. I've just focused on nutrition, movement, sleep so much over the last 15 years plus that, I mean, this one's just been super neglected. And I think that because I've soaked up so much information about this stuff and nobody's been talking about it, at least that I've seen.
Right. Well, it's ultimately like, why aren't they talking about it? And why wasn't I talking about it? Or why wasn't I willing to face it? Like, what was I so afraid of that I would find out? You know, for example, saying, okay, well, now social media is becoming a burden, or I need to post this, or I need to take this team call and go through the list of everything we need to do. I get off the call and I literally feel like I just ran 8 miles. It would, doesn't really happen in my life. I'm not a huge runner, but it felt like that, right? It's like, well, oh my gosh, well, I could say that this is part of the journey and this is what it takes to get to the top. And this is what I really love and it's going to pay off. But as cliche as it is, the only magic that happens for creators, because we as humans are creators, that is who we are. I mean, it's so fun to like see how quickly we have innovated. It's insane, right? But that's because we're all intuitively creators on this earth. It's like, well, why is that becoming so heavy? And where can I see that I'm doing it just because I'm on the cycle of I should do this? And the hardest conversation is the one where you look at your life and you realize, I have been unhappy in this life I've lived, and I've created this life, but I also realize that it no longer serves me. This shell I have outgrown, and that is just so terrifying. So it's understanding, like, if you're willing to do it, it isn't just let me express myself, because expression and creativity, right? We're so suppressed. We're so not allowed to express our body, our movement, our written word. We're so like niched out. Here's what I'm supposed to post about, and I can't express or go any up or down from that. Like, I have to stay in this plane to get my point across and find my audience and create my niche. But then all of a sudden we get limited and we're exhausted, and it's just such a cycle that I see over and over again. Cycle is a good word. I mean, this is one of those things where it's so hard to see outside of it when you're in it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we don't have any routine where it's a constant thing, sort of living in the life that you've built. Whereas, when you're eating, moving, sleeping, these are all specific time periods where you say, okay, what am I going to put in my mouth right now? And you get to stop and reflect on it and have this feedback. But when it's, am I creatively expressing things? Am I allowed to be the person that I want to be? Like, we just have no period of reflection built into our culture anymore. And this stuff used to be very, very common, where people would go on rites of passage. They would have periods. I mean, even people in Europe that, they take 2 months off of work per year, which lets them sort of let the dust settle and reevaluate and be like, okay, are things going the way I want them to? And like, do I need to shift anything? And I've sort of been pretty crazy about this stuff for a long time, having structure around monthly reviews. I think one of the first times we podcasted, we talked about my crazy monthly and weekly daily reviews. Yes. And I think that I was using that a lot to figure out where I want to go and how I want to do that. But it was more focused in this do zone, and not asking, these other crucial questions of, what does it feel like? Is this charging me up or is it burning me out? And these are questions that are extremely hard to think about, because I don't think we're ever asking ourselves this. We're never taught this in school. No one suggests it. It's sort of taboo. It's like this fringe thing of like, oh, like, do you also need to go to a therapist? It must mean you're broken or crazy. At least like where I grew up, it wasn't, an acceptable thing to address any sort of mental health issues. It's grit your teeth, bear down, and go through it. Right. And it's also, it's slowly getting to become more acknowledged, but it's almost a blurred line of checking off the box that's still not actually letting people be in their body and present. And as a doer, one of the biggest things that as I was figuring this out and writing the book, and just kind of, ultimately this book is journal entries. So I'm a huge journaler. I always, when I get stuck on something, just pick up a pen and problem solve on its own. It just expresses. So if you ever feel stuck in your head, that's the perfect way to kind of get it out. but we have a to-do list. And so when you're a doer, because I do think most people are doers or feelers naturally, there's really not a ton of knowers that come into the world. That's kind of the work of what we need to do in our lifetime, is working on the know, whether that's value, whether that's breaking belief systems, but we usually are a doer or a feeler. So us as doers, to learn to feel is counterintuitive because it comes off as lazy. And so to feel, one of the simplest things I started doing was at the end of the day, how do I kind of like say I have to shut it off, because we work for ourselves. There is no shut off. There's no office that shuts down, right? We always have our work. And so it would be just taking a shower or a bath and literally going through my schedule and saying, through this day, starting at this time, how did that meeting feel? It felt good. I felt energized. Okay, well, what about this? Oh, God, that was weird. I didn't like it. You can even like feel where it feels weird for you and dig into that if you want to. But you start to notice like, oh, there was things that felt good and feels things that didn't. And you slowly can create a life where you're like, okay, well, last time I had that conversation or had that meeting, that didn't feel good. So what if I delegated that? Or what if I did that over email? Or what if I did it over Zoom instead of a coffee date? So I have some boundary for the things that I already know aren't going to feel good. I am slowly shifting. And then secondly, what I started to do is I create a to-do list, like kind of the things we have to do as business owners and we have to kind of take care of, even though there ultimately is no have to, which we'll eventually all learn. And then we create a to-feel list. And it sounds so silly, but it's like, okay, what are the things that based on my mood or based on the day or based on the circumstance, it might change whether I'm excited about it or not. And I'm just such a huge believer that when we only choose the things that make us feel good and only put ourselves into places and situations knowing that they're going to give us a good result and make us feel excited or energized, it will attract more and more of those experiences. Yeah. So it's just this beautiful recognition of like, it's not overly complicated, but it is, oh my God, so hard because when I don't have a long to-do list, I feel like I'm not doing enough, right? It feels too short. It feels like I'm missing something. And that is what you just said of reflection. And the word of my year is solitude. And so what place in our life every single day do we have nobody around us, not a podcast, nothing, not even sometimes music, that we are just alone in our own head and we aren't terrified by that? Because if we are terrified by that, or if that's really hard, then that is exactly where you need to focus on. Not the supplements, not the sleep, not anything else, except just that thing of how can I be alone in my own thoughts and for the first time not be terrified of what might come up.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where, and like, I'd love to hear your opinion actually on, so that uncomfortable nature of it. So when you reflect on the day and you say, okay, let's make this list of things that feel good versus now you're saying like, okay, this might feel uncomfortable. How do you tease out what is just uncomfortable and worth working through because it's something that you're maybe avoiding because there's a little bit of fear or some emotion behind it versus something that just doesn't feel good and you shouldn't do? You understand what I'm saying?
It's a great question.
So I'm personally still struggling with that myself to figure out which is one to lean into versus lean away from.
Yes. Well, if you're a doer, you have to know, or if you're relating to some of this of to-do lists, you have to know and give yourself a pat on the back of like, you never dropped the ball, right? You have gotten to where you are because you worked your ass off, and you kind of have to acknowledge how far you've come and where you've come. And all of us can do this, no matter who they are. There's steps that have been taken. And I think that was the first step for me, is just acknowledging my pattern is to actually make shit happen. So I need to give myself a little bit of more credit in that space. And so if a situation comes to me and it's like, okay, do I not want to do it because it's uncomfortable, or do I not want to do it because I'm terrified of it, or do I not want to do it because it actually isn't best for me? Right. That meter gets easier and easier. And I just wrote about this yesterday I just drew it out. It's like when you look at doubt, 2 arrows under it. doubt number one is you don't think you can do it. And therefore you're having this fear reaction of like, ugh, that doesn't feel good. I don't know if I can actually get there. Maybe I'm not the person for that. It's coming out of a sense of I'm not good enough. I either have to prove it to somebody that I'm good enough. I could maybe take that on, or I need to take that on because that feels like it should fit in the box, but it still kind of feels wrong. And what I'm learning is that difference than the other, which is a hard line. And all of us are learning this at the same time, I believe, if like, okay, we have something that's uncomfortable, but I'm excited about it. So for me, my reaction, my yes of I'm doubting it, but I'm doubting it from a sense of I want to explore this. I want to get curious about it. I would love to see if I could be the one that solves this problem versus I'm doubting it because maybe deep down, I don't think I actually can do it. And I'm trying to prove myself. And I don't know if that helps at all, but it was that for me is like, am I trying to prove it? And that ultimately comes down to like my ego. If I can get my ego to shut up, then most of the things that should go away because it's like, who am I trying to impress? Is it for, increasing my bottom line? Is it because I want to make it look really good on paper? Whatever it is for business, very quickly you can start to understand that it's actually more your ego that's getting more from the doubt than actually who you are and your essence and you as a creator feeling like you're challenging yourself and getting yourself in situations that are only going to help you grow instead of putting you in that cycle that goes into the negative space.
Yeah. Totally get it. And I think that one of the ways that I've tried to think about it too is if I'm unsure, I'll do the thing and then see, okay, afterwards, am I glad and how do I feel afterwards? And like, okay, then that's one of those things. And then sort of categorize those of like, oh, like this type of meeting, I have some sort of shame tied to, and it's feeling uncomfortable, but through it is growth. And afterwards I always feel better and sort of proud of myself.
Yeah.
Whereas otherwise it's like afterwards I felt just the same, or if not worse than before. It's like, okay,
right.
That's one that should be skipped.
Well, it's interesting. It's just like a workout, right? Like,
exactly.
don't want to go to a workout, but we know we'll feel better after. Well, sometimes we actually don't feel better after. And we know this because we're doing the wrong types of workouts, or we're completely depleted in certain nutrients, we're dehydrated, whatever the reason might be. But I feel like I always have given myself, I call it the 8-minute rule. So what would the 8-minute rule be outside of a gym? You go into the gym for 8 minutes, still not feeling it, go sit in the sauna, foam roll, call it good. What would that look like for, business or actions that we have on our to-do list? And I just had this moment. Do you know Spotify, like your Discover Weekly? Mm-hmm. If you don't give active feedback to your Discover Weekly, it's kind of like a meh playlist, right? But if you get a Discover Weekly playlist and you spend even 4 songs, either liking or skipping and giving this feedback, it will create the best playlist. And so I have this playlist that I was listening to and I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. How do they know? And I thought about it. I'm like, well, they know because I gave it feedback. I said yes and I said no. And so everything in our life, we have that ability to like, you know what, that didn't feel good. Now I know. So just what you said, like next time, now that I'm aware of it, knowing that that's not a crazy feeling. I don't have the do hat on. I'm not just grinding. I'm not just here. I'm also learning how to feel. So when I leave that room, I can say, well, did that make me feel a certain way? And next time, especially if it did make you feel a good way and you acknowledge it and you kind of have that moment of like, yes, I need more of that, then more of it will come. It will create this life playlist that ends up being exactly what you're looking for before you even know what you're looking for. Because we don't know what we're looking for, right? We just want to grow. We want to evolve. We want to be challenged. We want to change, but we also don't want to be burnt out and tired and, surrounded by stupid details of things that tend to bog our mind and get on our plate very quickly. And so that was also a really big epiphany I had of like, I can give little feedback and trust that if I'm just staying in the right space, then more of the good will keep coming. Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty amazing way to look at it. And what I'm curious about is sort of going back to what you talked about as far as feeling goes and, how people just generally right now are not used to feeling their actual feelings. And this sounds ridiculous. I think especially growing up where I did, where it was sort of, toughen up and just work harder. Curious as far as if you've spent much time in the last year and what you've seen as far as a benefit from that.
Oh my God, Anthony, my whole life's changed. It's been amazing. I mean, I didn't know how to feel. I have a poem in the book that talks about my analogy of, I wanted everything to be a metaphor and an analogy. I didn't want just written text because I felt like we as humans, we have more connection to feelings than we do stories. So I wanted to induce this feeling. And one of the things that helped me realize this was watching Harry Potter, realizing even though I'm obsessed with Harry Potter and my cat's name is Gryffindor, that I had no idea what was about to happen in the movie. And I realized most of my life, and I've been like this since I was 2 years old, has always been doing. And I can blame it on brain trauma and some concussions. I can blame it on the way I was raised. I can blame it on a lot of things, but ultimately who I am as a doer is because I did not want to feel. And anytime I got uncomfortable, I would just do something. I would always create something. I was the happy one. I wanted to create opportunities because I didn't want to sit in what felt not good. And so I think when I started to understand, well, why am I scared of sitting in this? And what might meditation look like for me? And what am I running away from? It has I can't even express to you in the last 12 months, my life has completely changed in the sense of I am a much better boss. I am excited every single day. The calls that I have are always productive, and I am empowering my employees to speak up and tell me their stories and giving this kind of platform to other people that before I was too busy to even notice. It was, I have a goal and I have to get to that goal. And if I don't get to that goal, then we're not there yet. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And then literally throughout this journey of feeling more, meditating, I have a bunch of things in my feel toolkit that if I don't do, I go straight back to doing because I am such an innate doer that I have to actively pursue feeling or it doesn't happen. It's not a natural thing for me. If I don't do that, then I instantly, it's the pendulum swing is worse and worse and worse every time. It's like, oh my God, I'm a bad person. And I'm not a bad person. I'm such a better human. And that means I have more ideas. I have more expansiveness. I have the ability to do my work in the way I want to, which is just expressing myself, not just setting expectations for myself. And so then the creation that's coming and the products that are coming from that, whether that be the supplement line or whether that be Empress, the magazine, whatever it is, it's like so much power to it. It's creative energy. That's not tied to expectation or monetary issues or monetary needs that allow it to be what creation's supposed to be, which is timeless and fun and expansive. And when I say this, when I was reading my poems, it's like when you see someone create and truly create, it is inevitable that you will be inspired to create. It is the most contagious thing. You're like, wow, that person wrote a poem. Maybe I'll write. Or wow, I want to hear that poem. And now I want to write a poem. It's like it never ceases to amaze me that just by creating without any expectation and by doing it in a way that's not for ego purposes, it is what lights people up. And that's, if anything, more than supplements or more than, maybe not more than good food, but it's what our world is lacking, especially in our country. It's like we are so uninspired. We are so flat. We are so inexpressive. We don't know how to express ourselves. And then we're on Instagram going post to post feeling like, oh, maybe that's my thing, or maybe that's my thing. I don't know what my passion is. It's like, well, because we're so in the middle of doing that, we have no idea who we are because we're not giving ourselves a chance to kind of sit with our thoughts and figure ourselves out. And if we could do anything and help this world be a better place, it's inspiring people to create for themselves, not recreate what somebody else created, but to create what is true to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that I couldn't agree with you more about how my approach has been in my results over the last year, sort of working in the same thing. I was unable to feel feelings until I would say about 13, 14 months ago. And it's been a lot of work to try to figure out how to do that, and very confusing and really challenging at times. And it might sound just ridiculous from people who are hearing this. And I mean, that was my experience too, thinking about and like hearing these concepts for the first time and I was not a believer until I started experiencing it myself. And I mean, there are books on this. Body Keeps the Score is a really good one, talking about how emotional trauma and just emotions in general are stored in the body, and without expressing them, you're not going to be able to let this creativity and sort of like your essence as a human being come out. And there's a lot of good information even about the health problems that people have when they don't process emotions. I mean, so Peter Attia and Paul Conti did a really fabulous podcast on this topic. If anyone's interested in that, psychiatrists, and Peter is an MD, and so they work together a lot with people who have this emotional trauma, and cases where Peter goes, man, I can't figure out why this person's digestive issues aren't fixed, or their lipid panel or whatever, and they would work with Paul and work through a lot of their emotional issues, and they would all clear up. And this is something that I've seen as well, like working with people afterwards and going with people and chatting with people like you who have done the work themselves and myself. It's just, it's profound how much this is just misunderstood and not understood at all, as far as how mental health and just suppressing emotions leads to negative other health consequences. And I mean, one of the most important things here is that, I mean, if you were to define health, like how would you define what is it to be healthy?
That's a great question. I mean, there's a reason autoimmunity is at an all-time high, right? And exactly what you just said. It's like, how are we as humans always seeking externally the answer, right? I want this practitioner. I want this plan. I'm going to try this supplement, this. It's like all of that, although there is a place for each and every one of them, nothing matters until you are healthy in your own body, and your body will tell you exactly what you're unhealthy in. And so I think it's so powerful too, because especially when you're looking at things like, maybe it's a autoimmune disorder against your thyroid, or it's something that is truly changing the way you're looking at life. Like your lens is different because you can't lose the weight. Well, how powerful, but also how annoying is it for somebody to say, actually, it's the work that you need to do inwardly. And so but anyway, with health, I feel like for me, it is, I know when I'm the healthiest. And this kind of goes back to what you just said of, if I did not eat perfectly, if I did not take all the supplements, and I do eat really well just because I want to live forever, right? I know how to optimize my body and my brain every single day so I can be as creative as possible. That's my only goal, is to be as creative as possible. And so a lot of it has to do with food and supplements, but it more so has to do with this like sense of, when I wake up, I don't need coffee. I wake up, I feel wide awake. I feel rested. I feel like I could instantly smile. I wake up with the sun. There's this kind of level of me waking up that is so tied to me feeling healthy. Outside of everything else, work and kind of energy throughout the day is definitely an indicator for me personally. But I will say that the morning time of how I wake up is everything. It gives me everything I need to know. Did I wake up a lot last night? Do I feel hot? Do I feel irritable? Do I feel groggy? Do I need 6 cups of espresso? Like, that is always my indicator of health, is like, how are my natural energy levels? And knowing how creative I am is a direct output of that, allows me to kind of say, well, where in my life can I be healthier? But it's true. I mean, if I didn't eat perfectly or take the things, my body would react, whether that's stomach aches, whether that's huge flare-ups on my skin, all of these warning signs and symptoms. Like, your body is just simply trying to tell you something, which is, the Body Awareness Project, like just being aware of your body and knowing that that is something that you can get curious about and not try to just go into problem solving mode with. That is a really healthy start for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think very simply how I would define health myself is just, health is freedom of disease or suffering. And you get there through a lot of different means. And this is just, again, I think that's why I rebranded the podcast name to The Natural State. I just think that the natural state of any living organism is health. It's free of disease and suffering. And I'm not talking about suffering as far as like doing a hard workout or imposed things like that. I think that's totally fine. But if you're just at a normal state sitting here and your arm hurts because you broke it yesterday, okay, I'd say that's unhealthy. Does your gut hurt because of what you ate? Okay, unhealthy. Does your low back hurt because you're sitting all day long? Unhealthy. Are you groggy and suffering because you're not awake and alert because you haven't slept? Unhealthy. And I think the same thing goes to emotion. Like, can you sit in a room by yourself without any other stimuli, like you were saying earlier, for an hour and not suffer because of the emotions that come up? And I think that a lot of people and a lot of humans haven't even tried that since they were born. Like, this is something that's not like, when's the last time you think that most people have gone an hour just watching their thoughts and their feelings in their body?
Yeah. Oh man.
Probably never.
Happen.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you could do that and think like, does my arm hurt? Yes or no? And answer question, no, pretty easily. But as far as, you know, if you're looking at like, are you healthy? Yes or no? And checking the boxes, I think we have to look at emotional well-being. Can you feel feelings and not be ruined by them? Can you not suppress them? You know, and I think that, I mean, the way Martha and I always chat about this, my fiance, we, you know, you say doer and feeler. We sort of say thinker and feeler, which I think is pretty much the exact same thing. Like, I'm always in my head. And so for a lot of people, I'd say it's sort of like 50-50 sort of split down the middle with these concepts. A lot of people, you and I are very similar in this regard, will relate to that, the 50%. And the other 50%, I think, are overwhelmed by so much feeling that they can't really decide which is theirs or someone else's. And I think that, you know, that's what Martha is as well. And I think that, you know, if you do feel a lot, you know, being able to process that and move through it instead of feeling something, then suppressing it by feeling somebody else's feelings, and really thinking, okay, what is my emotion? Not judging it and trying to run from it and just, you know, again, maybe people are different. My upbringing was not such that it was okay to express different emotions. And so I went into my head, and I think that I'm very grateful for that. I've built a lot of phenomenal tools, but yeah, I mean, trying to figure out and like not judge if I'm feeling sad and just let sadness come through, or anger or whatever. And just be like, oh, that's interesting. Breathe into it and let it go instead of suppressing it. Because what happens is, and I notice this with myself all the time, if I have a feeling that I don't know I'm aware of that's happening, I will do stuff or be in my head and think more as a way to not feel that feeling.
Right. You just go right into your pattern that feels comfortable.
Right.
But
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead. No, I want you to finish this. This is so good.
Yeah. And it's just like, I think that having to do that and suppress things is basically just pushing down. It's like sort of like taking ibuprofen if your body's aching. Again, if you're defining health as lack of suffering and your low back hurts, so you take pills to do that and take care of it, the same thing's happening when you're not expressing your emotions and letting those things out and experiencing them as a human. Like, that's just a normal human thing. And if you're sort of taking the equivalent of ibuprofen by doing tasks or feeling other people's emotions and not feeling your own emotions, you're not addressing your own self-suffering.
Right. Well, and I'll give a little bit of context of my background to kind of help, because it sounds so easy to like feel your things, but for me and my personal journey to feeling it, and like for sure, the way you are raised and basically before you are 8, you are going to define how expressive you're going to be with your feelings, because before you were 8, you were either told you're safe to feel these or you're not safe to feel these. And so a lot of us are like, okay, I'm ready to feel things. But when I started to do this, and this was work with a therapist years and years ago, it was saying, well, what do you feel? What do you need? And I had no blueprint. I had no idea what I needed, because I was always in action, doing something either for other people or just staying busy. So I didn't have to have kind of a sit moment, but it's so true when people say like, what am I feeling? It is like, I don't even have a menu to choose from.
Exactly.
I don't even know where to begin, because I am going into personal stories. And this is so great when you're working with someone that works with trauma or inner child work. I work with a lady named Alicia Miller for this. Even plant medicine, that is the power of it. And I'm not necessarily saying ayahuasca. I'm talking flower essences, agrimony, that can bring these memories up that we have so suppressed, because it is so deep down, because we had to protect ourselves. We had to have armor. We had to keep ourselves safe in those scenarios when you're 4, 5, 6, 7. And for me, all the way up till I was 18. And so it's layering after taking layer after layer. And sometimes, and this is just a little bit of a tangent with plant medicine, it rocks people, or any type of, journey or awakening. It's like you are so ready for the end result that you just go for it. You're like, lay it all out, strip it off. I'm here to feel. And you immediately contract, because your body is not supposed to do that. It's terrifying. You put yourself in a horribly vulnerable position where if you are just letting yourself listen to the cues, listen to this podcast, let it resonate when it's like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, maybe I should. These are all little, pokes in the holes that to let the light through. It's like we are trying so much in our society to like just strip it off and rip it off. But especially with feeling, it is such a delicate process. It's like you have to see yourself as somebody that is delicate and being gentle with yourself in that way, because if not, either one, you're going to try it and you're never going to want to try it again, or two, it feels so daunting that you're not going to actually begin to start to feel it. So I will say flower essences have been a really good step. And then even getting into, more, depending on your belief systems, whether it's cannabis or mushrooms or something that can be a little bit more therapeutic, even at a micro level, that those types of things allow you to naturally unshield yourself, because that is all it is. Just imagine a giant onion, right? We're just going layer after layer after layer. And every question you ask, every time you meditate, every time you spend time feeling, you are allowing yourself to let down the armor.
Right. And it's the way I think about this now. I tried, like you said, to take it all in at once. Starting last year, I was like, oh, this is sort of the next thing. Okay, I'm just going to do it all at once. And it's sort of analogous to me, like having never worked out before and then running like 3 marathons in one day and like doing 500-pound squats and being like, oh man, this is not the way. And like I sort of need to recognize that I've been working out for 20 years. I've been like on this nutrition path for 15 years. And I'm still figuring things out. And I think that it's tough for me, like as I'm so excited now about this path and sort of this avenue to unlock that I think is just as powerful as nutrition or movement, that I don't really have a lot of good resources to give people as far as here's how you get started. Whereas in nutrition and movements, et cetera, it's like, it's pretty easy to give people like okay, you can read this book, you can go to this. And it's like right now, like you said, I have this therapist, like I could recommend a therapist that I use too, but that's not really sustainable for most people. I mean, there's some books, like I said, The Body Keeps Your Score. Do you have any other tips as far as if somebody's listening to this for the first time, is maybe like starting on this sort of emotional journey, or like curious, like, oh shit, am I doing a bunch of stuff in my life that's actually just because I'm suppressing emotions and I want to figure out how to unlock this stuff to level up in whatever way or just be free from suffering? Like, do you have any sort of places to point people to?
Yeah, well, I will say my book, although it seems a little abstract, the layers that it uncovers when you spend time with every chapter for you individually is really powerful. So for example, I will say this, like one of the first things that people can do, there's a poem I wrote about the first time I had a saxophone solo, and I was so excited and so proud. And then it was my turn and I was so nervous, my mouth dried up and I squeaked so loud that I was terrified. And all I wanted to say, I know it's one of those moments, but we've all had those moments. That is a moment where you look at that poem and you say, well, where was my first moment where I remember being embarrassed, that I remember being shamed, that I remember feeling like I was so ready to do something and then someone told me I didn't do a good job. Those are the questions you have to start asking. Yeah. It is all going back into when did you start to doubt yourself? So every poem I wrote has a story and a layer that I hope, and it gives people tools to say, well, where can I do that for my life? And where is it relevant for me? And the things coming up from that are really powerful. It's exactly what I am hoping. So it's asking the right questions, which sometimes we don't know how to ask, which I'm grateful to be able to write a book that maybe starts to ask more questions that we didn't even think of. But I think there's two things, and I talked about this in my March Empress call. Like if you are a doer, the easiest thing is to go through and say what energized me and what drained me, and have zero guilt about slowly letting go of the things that drain you. That is probably the biggest work, is why do I have guilt letting go of this? And just keep talking to yourself through it all. Write it down, see where you feel guilt, sit in that guilt and say, okay, well, I know this isn't mine to carry, so how can I let go of it? But just start by saying what feels good and what doesn't. And then for my feelers, when it comes to like getting them to do something, I do a 3-part process. And it's number 1, do it solo, where nobody can see you and it's by yourself and it's completely safe, because we're usually a feeler because we are somebody that got really embarrassed when we tried to do when we were a kid. And that is something really powerful for my feelers to understand, is like, where did they get silenced, or where did they get told that they weren't good enough to do what they wanted to do. And then all of a sudden they just sat in it and felt it instead of actually acting on it. And so number one is act on something that you are terrified of doing. But for me, that was reading poetry. Like, I was really terrified of reading poetry out loud. It was so personal and vulnerable, and a side of me that I wasn't willing for people to see, because I was like, meathead hippie, like, yeah, I don't know. It's just like the shell that I had was so intense. And so started to read the poems by myself in the bathtub. And then the second step is you read a poem where there's a chance that somebody else could hear you. So maybe you're outside and your neighbor might walk by. This goes for like dancing too. This is something I did with dancing. It's like, I'm dancing, but I'm also like, maybe someone could see, but it's okay because they're a stranger. They don't really matter. And you do that more and more as you build the confidence to finally do it in front of ultimately someone you care about and someone you love, that you want to just be seen and heard from. And so I think there's, so many different tools and mechanisms. And, my goal, just like you, is articulating this in a way that is approachable, but also I don't want to take the magic out of it, because it is so individual. It is so exploratory for each person. It's saying, for me, what did this trigger? And that is exactly what you need to work on, versus something that's do it all. It's like, I could go by step by step by step by step, but that's their journey, not mine. And my journey needs to unravel this way. And so it's just this innate trust. It's like you're listening to the podcast, you're doing the work, you're taking care of yourself, and you are spending time by yourself and hopefully meditating and trying to do a little bit of the do and the feel and the know. And then the things will unravel. It will happen. I mean, that's the triangle of manifestation, is do, feel, know. When we do a little bit of each of it, the light bulbs turn on, and that's all we can ask of ourselves. Because if we rush it and we turn on all the lights, we will instantly want to turn them all back off.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and this is some of the things too, like you're talking about, this, what do you say? Saxophone recital that went bad and they had this emotion. And I mean, I thought it was bullshit to be like, you don't suppress and store emotions from that long ago. But I mean, until I experienced that actually happening and having these sort of vivid memories and experiencing the feelings, like it's real. And I'm the most factual person that you could find on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
And so for me to sort of let go into this, like, it's been amazing. And I think that I have an idea for the process volume 2, which is maybe you contribute some more stories. I'll add some of my really embarrassing, awful tales of shame, and we can make a workbook saying like, what is this? Like, did you have anything similar to this? And write it down, and then pause for 5 minutes and feel what you feel. And I think that, one of the meditation changes that I made in the last year that, I sort of use as a tool now is, sort of like a meditation, but just seeing what I can feel in my, like, scanning through my body and not trying to just not think. I think that's what people generally who aren't really experienced in meditation believe, is that like, okay, I should do this app and just clear my mind and then I can be more relaxed later. I actually think that it's really effective, at least if you're trying to work through this stuff, of being able to pause for a little bit and actually just make space to feel feelings in a 5-minute increment. And one of my therapists just worked with me and said, okay, knowing your personality, I know you're going to go for an 11 out of 10 intensity. And if you feel feeling, like, crank it up to 6 or 7. And if it's rising above that, then like sort of get out of it and shake it off. And then just being able to sort of be more fine tuned with it has been extremely helpful. And now, I've brought that into now day-to-day stuff. And so in the past where, what have happened is I would have gone from 0 to 60 as far as like an emotional thing. And then my brain was so quick to shut it off and do something else that I wouldn't even realize that the whole cycle had happened. And then paying attention to it through this step of like meditation, where I just sit through it, close my eyes, feel a feeling, then tune in. Now it's sort of like this gradient becomes more clear as it's happening throughout the day. And when I'm in a reaction, so, say I'm in a work meeting, someone's doing something that's pissing me off, I can, instead of like be angry and like do something immediately, whether that's act on the anger or just suppress it and then go work and do something that's not productive. Now I can be like, okay, this is going on, and I can just sort of release it or address it or do whatever I need to do. But now I sort of have a finer tuned instrument just from that one sort of adjustment to meditation?
Well, and one thing, I think this is so good, and my personal experience of therapy in general, and this just popped in that I feel like it's important to say, is I have always done therapy that's very doing therapy. And so I have only tried to find like the feel therapy. This is like talk therapy or really mild therapy, or it almost feels useless. It feels like, to a doer, it's kind of like, well, what's the point of this? Like, just talking this out. So I think that, right?
I can relate, yeah.
Right. It's like, no, like, take me to ayahuasca and give me the, everything. Like, that is how I've operated, even in my feeling I was doing, right? It's like so I think that no matter what, it's going to feel, as a feeler, it's going to feel, when you're starting to do things, it's going to feel uncomfortable, but it's the good kind that we still have yet to figure out. And then as a doer, the feeling does feel too little. It feels like it's not enough. And,
right.
That's just knowing that going into it. It's like, yeah, oh, this is like, you're supposed to sit and feel everything.
It feels like an opportunity cost.
Right. It feels like, is this really worth it? But I promise you, I mean, and this is something that I feel lucky in. Everything I've done is just my own self-discovery. Like, let me lead the way and let me figure it out for myself. And then if it works, I'll teach it. Right. It's like, oh, every time it works. Holy shit. Right now is the best example of like the way my world has expanded, from the garden that I was in the other week to the opportunities that are coming into my inbox. It's the sign after sign after sign that you are on the right track. And that's the best part of any of this kind of awakening. Maybe the best way to explain health for me is expansiveness. Like, if I am expansive, am I attracting and am I growing? Am I healthy? And that is an inward and outward reflection. So the only other tip I think that would be helpful in kind of what you were just saying, of feeling where it feels good and where it feels weird, or feeling anything. And all the books it comes with audio. So if the audio is really nice it kind of gives you the workbook in and of itself, but it's the morning checklist that I have. And it's literally 1 through 7, because you might not be familiar with chakras if you're listening, but if you are so out of capacity of like, what is feeling? How do you feel something in your body? The simplest place is to say, well, what is out there when it comes to something that's been around forever and has been talked about, and true yoga actually embodies? And it is just understanding each chakra. That's something that is so powerful, because I was like, this is just such bullshit. Like, there's just no way. And as soon as I finally kind of sat and meditated, if I focused on certain areas, I would feel them. And then I was like, well, what am I feeling? And then you learn about chakras, and you're more likely than not able to go down the rabbit hole of like, oh, that feels like my solar plexus. That means I'm feeling creative and expansive. So when I wake up and that's not there, my whole job this morning is to make it there. Because if not, then I'm a useless piece of shit.
So how did you do that then?
So for specifically for alignment for me, and I do have a lot of rituals and things that I love. I have a little corner in the room, and I have like certain things. Some mornings are easier than others. Sometimes it takes like a little bit of a sauna or a hot bath or hot water to kind of get your brain, or even cold water to kind of get your brain to chill. But for the most part, it is just breathing and meditating, kind of typical meditation pose. And I start at the bottom, and is root chakra. Do I feel safe in my body? And then repeating, I am safe in my body. I am safe in my body. And I have this whole chapter of those being the words and mantras that I repeat associated with each chakra. Then you go to sacral chakra, and do I feel expansive? For me, I am a generator. So if you're familiar with human design, that's a great personality test to dig into, because you can actually learn where you pull your energy from. So as a generator, all my energy comes from my sacral chakra, versus somebody that might be a manifester, etc. So I know if I am trying to like be enlightened and open up my heart and, like think of all these ideas, none of that matters unless those places below are taken care of. Do I feel safe in my body? Do I feel safe in my skin? Do I feel secure in my home? And that includes finances. And if I'm having a rocky business month, or if I'm having a kind of crazy, like, oh no, shit just hit the fan, then again, my whole work is like, just be in in that space, that's my meditation. That's the practice that I do of getting it to where that spot, that area actually turns on. And it sounds ludicrous, but as soon as it does and you feel it, there, you finally have an action to the meditation. So you're not just closing your eyes and hoping that a third eye pops up in the darkness, which actually does happen. The first time that happened, I was in a float tank and I was like so excited. I just like screamed. I was so happy because I was like, that means that everything else below, including my root and sacral and solar, I'm finally feeling what alignment is. And, we want these big ideas and we want to express ourselves and we want to put ourselves out there, but then we don't take care of ourselves at our core. And I think that that's so important when it comes to seeing meditation in a different way. It is for me to ultimately be my biggest, brightest, most expansive self. It means inward work every single day, sometimes twice a day. And I am useless as a business owner unless I make sure I check that box.
Yeah. How'd you get in the chakra game? Because this is one of those things where I think that a year ago, 2 years ago, I'd be like, okay, we have to cut this part out of the podcast. Like, no one, like, I'm not going to share this information.
I know. Are you proud? I know. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
But okay, now, so, like, when I come and I know, old Anthony would have called this just absolutely fucking bananas. Like, now I should probably just like figure it out and explore it and figure out what's going on. So,
okay. So I have the way I got into it. Actually, my mom. So, do you know what a pendulum is?
Yeah.
So pendulums, the easiest way for me, and I mean, I know this is woo-woo, but I pendulum basically first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chakra. And I can see right away.
So I don't know what this pendulum, like I know what a pendulum is.
Oh,
but I don't know how you would use it in the way you're talking about.
This is good for listeners. So a pendulum is just this little beautiful thing on a chain. And it's just something that has been used forever. And I think you can use anything. My mom showed it to me when we were in Patagonia a few years ago. And I was like, there's just no way this is real. But then I got one and I absolutely love it because it is something that helps you when you're still trying to figure out your yeses and your nos. Our body knows, right? Our body keeps the score. That's one of my favorite books for sure. It's like, but our head is so much in the way that it stops us from saying the truth. And so the pendulum is just a really easy, fun way. Some people, think it's just a total crock of shit, which that's okay. I don't care. I use it. And it's something that turns, when you ask it questions, it will go clockwise for yes or counterclockwise for no. And so it's a simple way for you to kind of say, well, energetically, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And I've had a lot of energy healers use it on me. And then I started using it for myself where I could say, okay, my first chakra, my root chakra, is that in alignment? And a lot of times for a while, it would say no. So I knew I needed to sit. I needed to think about my root chakra, which is just a red color. You can learn more about it and the mantras and the words and the smells to dig into it. And then if it feels good or if it is good, you go to second and same thing, yes or no. And so for me, it's just saying, well, which ones kept coming up over and over and over again? Because I'm always creative. So that's my solar plexus chakra. That one was always good. But my solar plexus chakra was always better when I took care of my root. And I think all of us struggle with root the most. And I write about this in the book because it is our body and it is our finances. And if we do not create a better relationship with money and create a better relationship with our body, whatever that means for you, then you will always be seeking. And the inner work those two are so damn important. So that's how I use pendulum and chakra. And I would love to, I'm going to send you so many things, Anthony. Okay.
I'll put in the show notes. Maybe I'll do a update later or a solo podcast where I dive into this stuff.
Perfect. I mean, you have to. It's just a game changer.
Cool. I think that we've probably given people enough to chew on for this episode. So yeah, I mean, obviously you talked about the book, so maybe you give people where they can find that and then anything else that you're up to.
Yeah. So we're now on Amazon. I do highly recommend listening to the audio. Audio comes with it because I get to talk through some of this kind of in the workshop format that you said. So we're on Amazon, The Process. And then you can just find me on Instagram, Emily Schromm, and then my podcast, Meathead Hippie, which I just had you on not that long ago.
All right. Thanks, Emily. Thanks for coming on the show and diving into all this ridiculous stuff with me.
It's so good.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Natural State Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd really appreciate you heading over to whatever service you're listening to this podcast on, dropping me a 5-star review and your thoughts on the show. This helps us get discovered by more people and spreading the good gospel of health. And if you want to stay plugged into all of my self-health experiments, recent research in books that I'm reading and my interpretations of those things, products that I'm testing, and thoughts on all things related to health, check out my free weekly newsletter called The Feed. You can sign up for that at dranthonygustin.com/thefeed. That's dranthonygustin.com/thefeed. Thanks again for tuning in and your support of the Natural State Podcast.